Imagine vanishing in broad daylight. No fight, no sound, no trace. A young man leaves his home in California on a summer afternoon in August 1999 and simply disappears. No warning, no goodbye. One moment he exists, the next, nothing. His name was Tommy. He was 20 years old, full of fire, full of future, and his world just swallowed him whole. The police file would describe him as last seen walking alone, just that. Not abducted, not pursued, not fleeing, just walking. And then he became part of the endless catalog of the missing names typed into cold databases, photos tacked onto bulletin boards, in forgotten police stations, faces blurred by time and dust and silence. His mother would sit by the phone for years, refusing to change her number, just in case. His sister Marcy would stop celebrating her birthday, because how do you smile when someone who shared your childhood is now a question no one can answer? For 25 years they waited. For 25 years there were no calls, no sightings, no evidence. Tommy had been erased like a chalk drawing in the rain. And then April 2024, a hospital in Los Angeles. A man is brought in by paramedics after collapsing on the street. He's nonverbal, malnourished, unresponsive, but alive. No ID, no fingerprints in any system. The nurses call him John Doe. They treat him with care but move on. There are too many like him. Silent, nameless, lost souls. The city keeps swallowing. A reporter visits the hospital while doing a feature on homelessness and mental illness in South LA. She snaps a photo, one frame, a face behind a curtain. That photo makes it into an online article with 20 other nameless people, a detail in a sea of sadness. But one person sees it, Marcy. She freezes mid-scroll, her hands shake. It's a grainy image, poorly lit, but she knows that face. You don't forget your brother's eyes, even if they've aged 25 years, even if they're haunted and hollow now. She calls the hospital. She sends the old photos. She begs for anyone to listen. Fingerprints are taken again, manually, carefully, and this time they match. The impossible becomes real. Tommy is alive. It started with a scream, not of terror but of disbelief. When the voice on the other end of the line confirmed the fingerprint match, Marcy didn't cry. She couldn't. Her body locked up, paralyzed by something colder than fear, heavier than sorrow. Grief had taught her silence. But this was different. This was a resurrection. The hospital was hesitant. They'd seen this before. Misidentifications, mistaken hope, families desperate enough to believe anything. But Marcy wasn't guessing. She knew. She remembered the scar above his eyebrow, the way his left ear folded just slightly inward, the birthmark like a shadow behind his jawline. These weren't just features. These were facts etched into memory, unshaken by decades of longing. She arrived 2 days later, carrying nothing but a photo album from the 90s, her childhood diary, and a bundle of worn-out letters she had written to him over the years but never mailed. Her fingers trembled as she walked through the hospital doors. What do you say to someone who's been both dead and alive? She found him in a corner room, pale walls, machines humming. A thin man sat hunched in a wheelchair, staring out the window, as if waiting for something that would never come. The nurses warned her, he doesn't speak, barely reacts, may not even understand. But as she stepped into the room, something shifted. The air itself grew tense, charged, thick with a weight words couldn't carry. She whispered his name, just once. Tommy. He didn't turn, didn't blink. But the muscles in his neck twitched. Marcy stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid a wrong move might send him vanishing again. She reached out, placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, and that's when he moved. His eyes met hers, not with recognition, not at first. More like recognition was trying to claw its way back from a place buried under years of silence and isolation. His lips parted, but no sound came, only breath, shallow, shaking. A tear slid down his cheek, and he didn't know why. Neither did she, but they both cried. Doctors and social workers flooded the room with questions. Where had he been? What had happened? Why hadn't he come home? He couldn't answer. He still hasn't. Not with words, but slowly in fragments, in the language of gestures and flinches and dreams, a story began to form. The scars on his body told some of it, faint lines across his back, healed fractures in his wrists, damage behind his right eye, signs of injury, of captivity, trauma. There were nights when he'd scream in his sleep, the kind of scream that comes from reliving something too horrific to name. They had to sedate him more than once. But in his pockets, found only after he was admitted, there was a tiny folded piece of paper, torn at the edges, smudged and faded, but still legible. It said one thing: "Don't let them find me." Who were they? No one knew. Not yet, but someone had taken Tommy, not for ransom, not for revenge, for something else entirely, and whatever happened in those lost years, someone wanted it buried. What kind of prison leaves no bars, no walls, no locks, and yet keeps someone hidden for a quarter of a century? Tommy had aged, but not in the way time alone would cause. There was something different about the lines on his face, something unnatural about the way he flinched at sounds that weren't there, as if his very bones remembered a life no one else had seen. He didn't just look older, he looked fractured, like someone rebuilt from broken pieces but didn't know where they all belonged. For weeks, investigators scrambled to trace his past. There were no fingerprints on any missing person report. Tommy's original file had been archived, forgotten, lost in a system that didn't care much for those who vanished without scandal. DNA had never been collected back then. Surveillance footage from 1999, long destroyed. Eyewitnesses, dead ends. But there was one clue, a scar behind his left knee, shaped like a jagged crescent. The doctors said it was likely from surgery, not medical, improvised, possibly stitched by hand. Whoever had held him hadn't brought him to hospitals. Whoever had hurt him had tried to keep it quiet. Marcy begged for access to his medical history, but there wasn't one. Nothing since he vanished. No records of clinic visits, no signs he'd ever legally existed during those missing years. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. One night, while watching television in the hospital's common room, Tommy fixated on a background detail in a news segment. Not the reporter, not the story. A building, old brick, half covered in ivy, wedged between a liquor store and a pawn shop. His hand shot forward, trembling, pointing. He made a guttural sound, low, ragged, almost like choking. That single motion shook everyone. He was trying to say something without speaking. Detectives froze the frame, printed the image, and started combing the neighborhood. The building was abandoned, boarded windows, rusted hinges, no electricity. Neighbors said it hadn't been used in years, but the landlord records told a different story. Leased consistently under various shell companies with no real addresses. Clean on paper, invisible in reality. They broke inside. The air reeked of mildew and rot. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. In the basement they found remnants of something sinister. Chains, stained mattresses, duct tape, syringes. It wasn't a shelter, it was a holding cell. Whoever operated out of that space had left in a hurry. Dust hadn't yet settled in certain corners. Footprints were fresh enough to photograph, but the room wasn't empty. They discovered a series of Polaroids tucked behind a false panel in the wall. Dozens of faces, all male, all marked with numbers, no names. Some looked terrified, others dazed. Tommy's photo was among them, labeled #47. Authorities suspected it wasn't an isolated incident. Tommy hadn't simply been taken, he'd been processed, part of something larger, organized, hidden in plain sight. But why had he been released? No ransom demand had ever come, no confession, no tip-off. One day, after 25 years, he was just found collapsed on a street, 2 blocks from that building, like a discarded secret. It didn't make sense, until they looked closer at his wrists. A number, faint, branded, not tattooed, done years ago, and beneath it the skin had been burned, as if someone tried to erase it violently. Tommy had escaped, and someone had tried to make sure he never told anyone. The revelation shattered illusions. Tommy hadn't just survived, he'd outrun something massive, something coordinated. The moment investigators realized this, the entire tone of the case changed. It was no longer a story about a missing person. It had become a hunt for ghosts hiding in the real world. Federal agencies joined quietly. The FBI didn't hold press conferences. They didn't issue public warnings. They worked in the dark, combing through financial data, property deeds, travel manifests. That warehouse in South LA wasn't the only one. It was a piece of a hidden map, each point connected by silence, forged IDs, erased footprints. There were whispers of trafficking, not for money, not for labor, but for something more chilling. A market without buyers you could find. Victims scrubbed from every system, broken, reshaped, discarded. Tommy's fragment of paper, the one that said "Don't let them find me," was sent for analysis. Invisible ink beneath the handwriting revealed a second phrase, 53 gone. I'm next. That changed everything. It wasn't just trauma, it was documentation, a warning left in desperation by a man who believed his life had an expiration date, who had watched others vanish permanently, while clinging to the slimmest hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would find him before time ran out. A task force launched a multi-city search, trying to match the faces from the Polaroids found in the basement. Facial recognition programs scanned missing persons archives going back 3 decades. One by one, the identities began to emerge. A teenager reported missing from Arizona in 2003. A college student from Seattle, last seen in 2011. A homeless man from Detroit, nobody ever filed a report for. All of them had disappeared near transportation hubs, train stations, bus depots, highway rest stops, always alone, always during transit. No witnesses, no scenes, no calls. The connections were unnerving. Victims had no shared background, no common ethnic group, no financial link. The only thing that tied them together was vanishing, without explanation, and now, reappearing only in faded photographs, numbered like products. Tommy was the anomaly, the flaw in their system. He got out, no one else had, and now he was a threat. One night the hospital's security cameras caught a figure outside his room. Not a nurse, not staff. A man in a black hoodie, face obscured by a surgical mask, stood motionless for 17 minutes, staring through the observation window. When approached by guards, he vanished down a stairwell and out into the street. No trace left behind. Tommy didn't sleep for days after that. His body tensed at every creak of a floorboard. His eyes darted between shadows. He didn't speak, but he knew. The system that held him hadn't collapsed. It had adapted. It was watching. Marcy was moved to a hotel under protective custody. Tommy was transferred to a secure rehabilitation center under an alias. Even now, only a few people know where he truly is. The public thinks he's recovering somewhere peaceful, shielded from media. But the truth is, he's still hiding. And the people who took him, they're not done. Fear doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers behind closed doors, shows up as glances exchanged between strangers, or travels through untraceable messages that vanish after opening. That was the world Tommy had returned to, a reality so warped, the danger didn't live in daylight. It thrived in the quiet. Federal agents quietly expanded their reach. The more they uncovered, the more disturbing the truth became. This wasn't the work of impulsive criminals or local syndicates. This was clinical, structured, hidden within the folds of legitimate systems, false names, licensed vans, properties leased under fabricated identities, entire trails designed to disintegrate the second anyone followed them. one name surfaced, an alias tied to at least 4 buildings matching the one where Tommy had been held. Peter Ashcroft, not a real person, no tax records, no birth certificate. But somehow Ashcroft had filed permits, signed leases, and passed security clearances. Whoever built the system had resources, not just financial but political, legal, institutional. Investigators began facing resistance, warrants denied, files locked under executive privilege, sources backing out after unexplained threats. A tech analyst assigned to decrypt communications between shell companies vanished on her way to a coffee shop. Her apartment was found undisturbed, laptop still running, dog unfed, no sign of struggle, just absence. Meanwhile, Tommy began to write, not full sentences, not stories, he wasn't ready for that, but drawings, maps, codes. Sometimes he'd wake up mid-panic and scribble strings of numbers or rough diagrams of rooms with strange symbols scrawled into the walls. A psychologist noted the consistency, he wasn't hallucinating. These were memories, buried, scrambled, clawing their way up through decades of trauma. One recurring image appeared again and again, a door with no handle. Each sketch placed it somewhere different, one in a hallway, one inside a moving vehicle, one beneath a floor. Every door looked the same, steel gray, lined with bolts, but without any way to open it from the inside. When questioned, Tommy would shake his head violently and stop drawing for days. An intelligence analyst, formerly with the Defense Department, studied the drawings and cross-referenced them with decommissioned government properties, Cold War bunkers, underground facilities, remote compounds. One match came back in Utah, desert terrain, privately owned, disconnected from the power grid, the land registered under another fake name. A team was dispatched under the cover of a weather survey group. What they found sent shivers through every level of command. A single-story building, abandoned to the eye, sat half buried in the sand. Beneath it, 9 sealed chambers, soundproof, reinforced, empty, except for one thing. On the far wall of the last chamber, etched into rusting metal in crude, shaky letters, were the words, "I saw light once, I don't want it again." No DNA, no bodies, no evidence of who had been held there or for how long, but whoever had written that message had done so knowing it would outlive them. The team was pulled back less than 12 hours later. Orders from above. Classification locked it away. Not even the task force's own director was granted full access to the findings. An operation had existed, one that transcended borders, titles, laws, and it hadn't ended. It had only paused. The closer investigators got to the truth, the more invisible hands began pulling strings. Surveillance on Tommy was mysteriously rerouted. Phone logs disappeared from agency servers. One officer assigned to protect Marcy woke up to find his hard drive melted, literally melted, while still inside a locked case. Tommy grew quieter, his drawings more erratic, but one day, without warning, he pushed a folded piece of paper across the table to his nurse. She unfolded it slowly. It was a sketch of a face, not his own, not Marcy's, a man, older, deep lines carved into his cheeks, sharp eyes, scar over the left brow, and beneath it, in uneven handwriting, "He knows where the others are." Whoever this man was, he hadn't disappeared. He was still out there, watching, waiting, and maybe planning something worse. There are stories that end. This isn't one of them. In the months following the discovery of the Utah facility, a quiet war began, one not fought with armies or headlines, but in silence. Hard drives were wiped without commands. Case files vanished mid-investigation. Several members of the task force resigned abruptly, citing burnout. Others simply disappeared. No farewell, no trace. Marcy, now living under protection in an undisclosed location, was forced to abandon her life. No work, no friends, just shadows and aliases. She speaks to Tommy once a week through encrypted video calls. Sometimes he responds with nods. Other times he stares blankly at the screen, his mind clearly elsewhere. No charges were ever filed. No suspects named. no suspects even officially acknowledged. Every journalist who tried to pry further was met with silence or strange setbacks, recordings corrupted, interviews suddenly cancelled, emails bouncing back with server errors that made no sense. But the public didn't forget. Once Tommy's image appeared on local news, the once lost boy found nearly 3 decades later, viewers began to write in. Letters, emails, phone calls, people claiming they remembered seeing others like him. A teenager on a Greyhound bus who looked terrified. A woman near a rest stop asking for help in a language no one understood. A boy wandering a gas station barefoot with a number etched on his arm. One even recalled finding a shoe, half buried near an abandoned motel, with the same code, #53. The numbers meant something, maybe victims, maybe inventory, but there's no official statement, no press briefing, just a growing sense that somewhere, out of reach, someone knows far more than they're saying. Tommy's health has improved, slightly. He no longer flinches when the door clicks. He sleeps through some nights. But he remains haunted by a single image, the faceless man from his sketch. No one has been able to identify him. He doesn't appear in any database. And yet Tommy draws him again and again, always with eyes that seem to follow, as if watching through the paper itself. One night a nurse overheard him whisper 2 words in his sleep. "They're waiting." She asked who. He wouldn't answer. But here's the part that stays with you. Not the tragedy, not the silence, not even the terror of what he endured. What chills you is this. Tommy was never meant to be found. His survival wasn't a rescue, it was a leak, a breach. And now that he's free, others may be at risk. So here's where you come in. Because these systems, these hidden networks, thrive in darkness. They exist only so long as no one asks the right questions, and that silence, that complicity, it ends with us. If you've seen something, if someone in your life vanished without a sound, if you've noticed patterns, names, faces, details that don't sit right, speak up, document it, share it, connect, and more importantly, don't look away. Because Tommy didn't just survive the unimaginable, he came back to warn us, and we may not get another warning. If this story moved you, share it. If it raised questions, dig deeper. And if you're not afraid of the truth, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover more untold stories, just like this one. Because the ones who vanish, they still have voices. We're here to make sure they're finally heard.